If you have ever scrolled through photos in National Geographic or Instagram and wondered whether there is any place on Earth with truly flawless natural scenery, the answer may well be Switzerland. Located right in the heart of Europe, with a modest area of only about 16,000 square miles smaller than the state of West Virginia, yet home to thousands of crystal-clear lakes and towering snow-capped peaks rising above 14,000 feet, this country has long been described as heaven on earth. Even foreign capital flowing into its financial centers remains enormous, with total assets under management exceeding trillions of francs, a testament to a powerful financial appeal that is no less impressive than its geographic beauty. But if you think this country is nothing more than glamorous travel postcards and sweet chocolate bars, you may be in for a surprise. Deep beneath that seemingly perfect exterior lies a unique philosophy of life, a social contract regulated almost down to the minute, and practical pressures that few people ever get to see beneath the polished surface. Let's explore what truly lies behind the extreme wealth and orderliness of this land. The Alps are not merely a mountain range, they are more like a gigantic natural concrete barrier blocking the horizon, occupying roughly 60% of the country's total territory and enclosing the nation with towering walls of ice and rock. Take a look at the Matterhorn in Zermatt Valley. With its nearly perfect pyramidal structure, it looks more like a computer-generated graphic than a natural formation millions of years old. It stands tall, cold, and completely indifferent to humanity's attempts to conquer it. Even Du Vorspitze in the Monte Rosa Massif, rising to 4,634 meters the roof of Switzerland, lies in such a remote location that most locals have probably only seen it on a postcard or television screen rather than ever setting foot there. It is a proud kind of grandeur, reminding people that not everything on Earth was created to serve human convenience, which seems somewhat ironic compared with the habit of flattening every obstacle to build highways or enormous parking lots back home. But the strange thing is that right beneath those eternal ice formations lies the water tower of Europe. Switzerland is the source of major river systems, such as the Rhine and the Rhone, holding roughly 6% of the continent's freshwater. While you may have to worry about droughts in Texas or California, this place seems to possess a natural water supply system operating with a precision no less impressive than a Rolex watch. Leaving behind the peaks that can send chills down your spine, the landscape transforms in an almost unbelievable way. The Central Plateau, Midland, covering roughly 31% of the country's territory, opens up into gently rolling hills and large, mirror-like lakes such as Lake Geneva and Lake Constance. This is where most of the population and economic cities are concentrated, resembling a more prosperous and orderly version of the New England countryside on a perfect weather day. However, if you travel south through the mountain tunnels, the scenery changes completely in the blink of an eye. The canton of Ticino welcomes you with brilliant sunshine, white buildings along Lake Lugano and Lake Maggiore, and an atmosphere infused with a distinctly Mediterranean character that makes you feel as though you have accidentally stepped into northern Italy. Here, people seem to be somewhat less obsessed with rigidity. On top of that, the variations in microclimates can be dizzying. The Foehn wind, a warm, dry wind that rushes down from the Alps, can cause temperatures to soar in early spring, standing in complete contrast to the biting -20 Celsius cold on the high passes of Graubünden. The weather here can probably be just as unpredictable as the Wall Street market or General Electric stock on a particularly wild day. It is precisely this dramatically fragmented terrain that has shaped such an unusual society. To maintain connections, people have had to bore historic mountain tunnels stretching for dozens of kilometers, such as the Street Gotthard Tunnel, or construct steep railway systems clinging to the edges of deep ravines. There is no room for carelessness when you live with a cliff on one side and an abyss on the other. Life, therefore, has been forced to follow the rhythms of nature, even if this sometimes creates an interesting divide. On one side are the modern industrial cities of the plateau. On the other are the high valleys where the ritual of driving livestock up to the summer pastures, known as Alpaufzug, takes place, a scene so slow-paced that it could leave anyone accustomed to the frantic rhythm of Chicago staring in bewilderment and wondering what the hell time actually is. If you have ever stood dazed on an Amtrak platform or stared at an indefinitely delayed flight notice at major United Airlines or Delta Airlines airports, you may feel that the concept of time back home is sometimes merely a suggestion. But in Switzerland, being late for a train might be considered a kind of cultural crime. A prime example is the SBB Federal Railway System, with an on-time rate of around 94.1% of trains arriving at stations on schedule with a margin of less than 3 minutes, along with a train connection rate of over 98%. This may well be the transportation network that would make any General Electric engineer nod in admiration. Here, precision seems to be more than just a technical number on an operational chart. It may be a way of showing the minimum respect for other people's time. A social rhythm established with the precision of a Rolex seems to leave no room for carelessness or disorder, which can sometimes make those accustomed to a more relaxed, spontaneous way of life feel a little suffocated. That orderliness does not stop at the railway tracks, but extends straight into every trouble sensed to and every corner of community life, through an almost unbelievably strict system of regulations. Laws and building rules seem to have their own way of defining peace and quiet. Noisy activities may be strictly prohibited at night, usually from 10 p.m. the previous evening until 6 a.m. the following morning, along with mandatory midday quiet hours. Even Sunday seems to have been elevated into a sacred day of rest. Don't expect to freely turn on the lawnmower to tidy up your front yard, or pull out a power drill to fix a cabinet on a beautiful Sunday morning. In some apartment buildings, even doing laundry may be restricted or completely prohibited on this day, simply to protect a shared space for physical recovery throughout the residential community. Strangely enough, these rules may not exist merely so people can wait around to be fined, but gradually become a form of self-imposed moral habit in which each individual seems expected to restrain minor personal desires for the sake of the peace and quiet of their neighbors. Your freedom may only be allowed to extend exactly to the point where someone else's peace begins. Unlike an extreme form of individualism that can sometimes inadvertently disregard its impact on those around it, Swiss society seems to require each citizen to make themselves a little smaller, to exercise self-control over their behavior, in order to maintain a stable common order. The result is an extremely peaceful, clean, and safe living environment, one that can make you forget what constant anxiety feels like. At the same time, however, this invisible form of social control can also create unseen pressure for anyone accustomed to the noise, informality, and excessive freedom of mainstream Western culture. Interestingly, despite being among the wealthiest countries in the world, Switzerland maintains a paradox that may make those who revere the American dream of homeownership stop and think. The homeownership rate here is among the lowest in Europe, hovering at only around 36% to 42%. While you may regard a mortgage check or ownership of a suburban house as a measure of personal financial success, the Swiss do not seem particularly eager to buy homes. Because of high real estate prices and enormous down payments, long-term renting is strongly protected by law and has become the standard, stable, lifelong choice for most urban families rather than merely a temporary solution. When you step into apartment buildings in major cities such as Zurich or Geneva, you will see that life here operates according to detailed building regulations governing nearly every minute of daily life. Every resident seems expected to strictly follow everything from the hours for using the shared laundry room to the level of noise permitted inside the building. In contrast to the solitary, constrained pace of life behind the walls of these urban apartments, rural areas such as the Bernese Emmental Valley still maintain the traditional longhouse structure, where nuclear families and farms remain closely connected across generations under one roof. Even so, extended household sizes in major cities tend to be relatively compact, maintaining close relationships while preserving a certain distance to avoid excessive obligations. Beyond the issue of housing, the financial pressure on families in which both parents work is also a story worth considering. With dual-income households becoming common, finding a spot at a daycare center in Zurich or Geneva can consume a huge amount of money, ranging from 2,500 to more than 3,000 Swiss francs per month for full-time childcare. Data has indicated that Switzerland spends a very low share of its GDP on early childhood education compared with the average, placing much of the burden of childcare costs directly on parents, rather than providing generous government subsidies. As if that were not enough, the traditional elementary school system also seems to enjoy testing adults' patience by using a split school schedule. Students often go home for lunch and then return to school in the afternoon. This inadvertently creates enormous scheduling pressure for those busy with full-time jobs, making the balance between career and family sometimes as difficult as managing a complex investment portfolio on Wall Street. If you have ever stopped at a McDonald's rest stop or grabbed a quick burger on a US interstate highway just to make a deadline, you may see eating as simply another task that has to be done during the day. But in Switzerland, the dining table seems to be a territory shaped by linguistic divisions and cultural borders, where each region appears to maintain its own philosophy about how to treat the stomach. Head up to the German-speaking regions in central and northern Switzerland, where Rusty reigns as a declaration of simplicity and substance. Once a traditional breakfast for Bernese farmers preparing to get their strength up before heading into the fields, that crispy, golden-fried shredded potato cake seems to embody the practicality of the people here. Simple, without extravagance, but strong enough to withstand the biting cold of winter. By contrast, if you move into the French-speaking regions around Lake Neuchâtel, Geneva, or Lausanne, the pace seems to slow down completely. Here, cuisine appears closely tied to the art of conversation over carefully selected local wines. People do not seem eager to swallow their meals and move on, but instead turn every dining table into a leisurely space, reminiscent of the way premium food brands under Kraft Heinz sometimes try to portray it in advertisements but rarely manage to recreate in real life. And if you cross the Alps into Canton Ticino, the atmosphere seems to change completely under the influence of the Mediterranean spirit. Risotto, polenta, grilled lakefish, or the habit of stopping by a bar for a quick shot of espresso may make you feel closer to the style of northern Italy. In this southern strip of land, rigidity seems to loosen slightly, making room for gentler and more open flavors. But the true symbol of togetherness perhaps lies in the legendary fondue cheese pot. It seems to be more than just a winter dish. It is a philosophy of highly communal sharing. When everyone gathers around a shared pot, dipping pieces of bread into melted cheese, often an exquisite blend of Gruyere and Vacherin Fribourgeois, people seem almost compelled to follow a set of amusing unspoken rules, such as the punishment for anyone who accidentally drops a piece of bread into the pot. It creates a form of social bonding that is difficult to find in hurried takeout meals. That meticulousness continues into the world of cheese and chocolate, two export products capable of earning the respect of food lovers anywhere in the world. With hundreds of highly local varieties of cheese, such as Emmental with its distinctive holes or Valais raclette, each product seems to carry with it the flavor of every meadow and the elevation where the animals graze. And then, when it comes to chocolate, the Swiss seem to regard it as a sacred duty rather than merely candy sold at a supermarket. From the historic invention of milk chocolate to the revolutionary conching process associated with classic names such as Lindt, the industry seems to have established an ultimate standard for aging time and temperature. In a world where major industrial candy companies in the United States often prioritize speed and production costs, the way the Swiss patiently shape every chocolate bar may make you wonder whether that slowness and meticulousness are actually the true luxury we have accidentally left behind along the road of life. Standing completely outside the European Union, Switzerland still maintains a highly competitive economy, with per capita GDP ranking among the highest in the world. Labor stability here also seems capable of challenging international geopolitical fluctuations, with the overall unemployment rate generally remaining low, hovering around 2.9% to 3%. The foundation of this resilience lies in an extremely disciplined fiscal policy, the federal debt brake rule. Thanks to this mechanism, Switzerland's public debt ratio remains around below 20% to below 30% of GDP, with federal net debt as of the end of 2025 at only around 16.1% of GDP, standing in stark contrast to the chronic deficit trend commonly seen among Western powers. That strength is anchored by three strategic pillars of global importance. First is the renowned financial and banking center in Zurich. Along Bahnhofstrasse, where you might expect to see nothing but luxury fashion stores, lies one of the largest centers for wealth and investment asset management on the planet. Even after system-shaking restructuring events such as UBS's takeover of Credit Suisse, global capital continues to flow here with an almost absolute level of confidence. Move over to Basel, and you will find a completely different healthcare and chemical powerhouse. This is where leading global life sciences corporations such as Novartis and Roche are concentrated, creating a research and export ecosystem that contributes an enormous share to the national GDP. And if you head back toward the Jura region, you will encounter a sophisticated watchmaking empire that accounts for roughly 2/3 of the value of global watch exports. Legendary names such as Rolex, Omega, and Patek Philippe are not merely instruments for measuring time here. They have become symbols of precision engineering and enduring value across the years. The work culture at these centers also comes with some interesting principles. The Swiss labor market demands professional standards and performance levels just as stringent as those of Wall Street or London, but it also fully respects workers' lives outside working hours. A common annual vacation allowance of 4 to 5 weeks, combined with the habit of ending the workday on time, rarely extending past 6 p.m., creates a sustainable working rhythm, rather than the burnout culture often found in bustling major cities. In exchange for high salaries and a high cost of living, the system requires each individual to commit to genuine performance, turning every employment relationship into a straightforward, clearly defined agreement whose stability can be measured over the years. Amid an office world filled with pressure and successive cycles of crisis, the way Switzerland operates its economic machine may make you wonder whether the endless busyness back home really produces sustainable results, or whether sometimes we are simply racing on a treadmill that never stops. In places such as the canton of Appenzell, Innerrhoden, or Glarus, people seemingly have no need for cumbersome secret ballot boxes or stacks of mail-in ballots that can easily arouse suspicion. Every spring, citizens still gather openly beneath the sky in the town square to participate in the Landsgemeinde, the oldest continuously operating outdoor assembly of voters in the world. You stand there in the rain or under the sun, raise your arm high, and directly decide on laws, tax policies, or local government elections without having to go through any parliamentary representative as an intermediary. It may be a form of transparency stripped completely bare, where power truly belongs to the people, demanding such a high degree of collective responsibility that citizens are willing to endure harsh weather to exercise their civic rights rather than simply sit at home scrolling through social media and debating politics. But if you think the Swiss are only rigid when it comes to these outdoor assemblies, the community club system, known as Verein, paints an entirely different picture, loosely regulated under the Swiss Civil Code. This system exists in every corner, from urban to rural areas, encompassing everything from hiking, shooting, and choir clubs to sports organizations. For newcomers, a population group accounting for nearly 27% of the total population joining a local Verein seems to be the most genuine and effective way to break through the initially reserved exterior of the locals. Without requiring substantial initial capital or complicated procedures, these organizations function like connective cells that bring people together, compensating for the reserved and somewhat distant nature often found in everyday interactions. And to balance out all that orderliness and dryness, the Swiss also seem to know how to let off steam through traditional festivals that serve as surprisingly effective social release valves. The most famous is perhaps the Fastnacht Festival, which lasts 3 to 6 days in Lucerne or Basel. During this time, the entire city seems to collectively cast aside its usual orderly appearance and immerse itself in drums, bizarre masks, Guggenmusik, and sharply political yet highly controlled satirical parades. Or, in late autumn, the Zibbele Merit Onion Market in Bern transforms the capital into a lively, cozy marketplace where agricultural traditions that have been celebrated for centuries take center stage. These festivals seem to be more than simple entertainment. They function as a civilized pressure release valve, allowing people to temporarily escape strict rules, restore their psychological balance, and reaffirm the strong bonds holding the community together. In a modern world full of growing skepticism toward institutions, the way Switzerland preserves its identity through such direct forms of participation may make you wonder whether the cumbersome political machines back home are losing sight of the most essential thing: genuine human connection. Switzerland seems to possess a special talent for turning even the most basic human needs into numbers capable of making your bank account cry out in pain. Major cities such as Zurich and Geneva regularly occupy the top positions in global cost of living rankings, where a family of 4 can easily burn through thousands of francs every month just covering basic expenses before even getting around to thinking about saving for retirement. On top of that, the healthcare system here also knows how to test your patience. Contrary to the misconception that Switzerland is an entirely free welfare state, every Swiss resident, whether a native or a foreigner, must pay out of pocket for mandatory private health insurance. With monthly insurance premiums continuing to climb, this inadvertently creates a rather unpleasant financial burden for middle-income households, making this otherwise excellent healthcare system sometimes feel more like a stressful financial investment than straightforward healthcare. Beyond financial pressure, finding a genuine place in this society also contains more than a few frustrating and sometimes absurd stories. Although people born abroad account for around 27% of the population, creating a large expatriate community. Swiss society still seems to maintain a fairly clear invisible distance between international residents and native citizens. At times, you may see these two worlds living side by side without ever truly blending together. Gaining recognition or a sense of belonging to a village or neighborhood does not seem to be measured in a few years of residence. It may take decades or even span successive generations. On top of that, language barriers help build additional solid walls. The deep divide between Swiss German, used in everyday conversation, Standard German, French, and Italian can make you feel like a lost tourist even in a familiar workplace or grocery store. And then, once you have overcome the challenges of money and language, you will face what people often call the perfect machine syndrome. Absolute precision and dense sets of rules, from how waste is sorted to how order and schedules must be maintained, can sometimes create an indescribably suffocating feeling. After living here for a long time, you may feel as though you are operating inside a smooth General Electric industrial production line, rather than living within a community. This country has no room for a tear it down and rebuild it mindset, focused on maximizing commercial space. Instead, people have chosen to let medieval structures coexist peacefully with contemporary life. Take Bern's Old Town, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, for example. With its 6 kilometers of covered walkways known as the Lauben, built in the 15th century, the area still functions perfectly as commercial infrastructure and pedestrian space today. You can walk beneath stone arches that are 6 centuries old, holding a smartphone in your hand, or stopping by a minimalist-style convenience store without feeling any awkward contrast at all. Or take Zurich, where the Langstrasse district, once an old industrial area, has been transformed into a creative space for designers, artists, and engineers. Yet, strangely enough, this was done without destroying the original architectural framework. Perhaps the Swiss understand that history is not meant to be put on display in a museum and admired from a distance, but rather used in everyday life, much like keeping an old Ford in the garage instead of sending it to the scrapyard. That preservation mindset seems to extend even into the most fragile corners of the culture, such as Romansh. Although it is spoken by only a small minority, accounting for about 0.5% of the population, mainly in the canton of Graubünden, this language descended from ancient Latin is still strictly protected by the government, taught in schools, and used in legal documents. In a globalized world that is flattening every difference into a vaguely similar shade, stubbornly preserving a language that perhaps most of the world cannot understand may be seen as obstinate, but it is also a way of asserting a resilient identity. Alongside this are centuries-old agricultural traditions such as driving livestock up to summer pastures, as well as traditional handicrafts that continue to survive alongside a high-tech economy. And perhaps the most interesting point lies in the way people here treat time. Despite possessing some of the world's leading engines of innovation, with prestigious universities such as ETH Zurich and EPFL producing no shortage of advanced technologies, the Swiss still seem to retain the habit of knowing when to stop. Instead of being swept up in the fast-paced cycle of consumerism or the hurried lifestyles commonly found in mainstream Western markets, they still maintain a culture of repairing household items instead of throwing them away, or simply spending a few leisurely afternoons walking along the lake or through the woods, watching the trees change color. That ability to disconnect from the global digital grind and reconnect with nature creates a rare and solid sense of inner quiet. Do you think so? Switzerland perhaps emerges not merely as a perfect postcard of snow-covered mountains, flawless order, and enviable economic prosperity, but also as a social reality filled with flesh and blood people, with all their hidden sides, strict rules, and unique challenges. It is a place where perfection can sometimes feel as suffocating as an industrial machine, but also a place that has managed to preserve an absolute respect for every quiet moment of human life. Ultimately, what lingers and makes people want to turn toward or seek out a small corner of this land does not seem to lie purely in premium chocolate bars, million-dollar watches, or staggering GDP figures. Its core value lies in the feeling of finding the right place to belong, a profound and warm concept that the locals call Heimat, something that, amid the chaos of the modern world, we sometimes have to travel very far to realize we have been missing. Is the orderliness and slower pace of life in places like this truly worth trading for the freedom and spontaneity we are accustomed to? Or would you still prefer a more colorful and messier life back home? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next fascinating journeys and perspectives.